On Tuesday, June 9th, 4 states will have their primary elections to decide which candidates move on to their November 3rd general election. Maine is the first of these four we'll review. Welcome to the 23rd episode in our series, analyzing the 2026 congressional primary elections for all 50 U.S. states. Maine is a smaller state with a population slightly over 1.25 million people. This gives them 2 seats in the House of Representatives. For this primary election, out of their 3 incumbents, only one of them is not running for re-election. You would assume that would be either the 71-year-old in the House or the 73-year-old senator. Nah, it's the 43-year-old rep in the 2nd District who's retiring. You make it make sense. Also worth pointing out, their other senator is 82-year-old independent Angus King and their governor 77-year-old Janet Mills. Maine, you appear to have an addiction to electing geriatric politicians. Stop it. Sadly, that probably won't happen in the 1st District. The APAC and corporate-funded geriatric incumbent doesn't have a primary challenger, and thus will be in the general election. In November, unfortunately, the options for voters in Maine's 1st District are to re-elect the warmongering corporatist or allow a warmongering MAGA cultist to gain power. My condolences, but the option that keeps less MAGA dipshits in power is better. As for their 2nd District and U.S. Senate race, there's plenty more to be said about those primary races and their secular lefty-approved candidates. Before we discuss them, we'll first review the primary process the candidates and voters must navigate to win, followed by a quick reminder of what it takes to earn the secular lefty approval as a congressional candidate. Maine is another state with a slightly more interesting and democratic election process. Their primary still consists of partisan ballots, and participation in the election is semi-closed. This means registered voters who are not affiliated with a party can decide which partisan ballot to participate in. The win condition is where the process differs from previous states discussed in the series, and a majority of states in our country. Back in 2016, Maine approved ranked choice voting for their elections, and this is what I would personally like to see adopted nationwide, along with a few other changes. For those not familiar with this process, it's exactly as the name suggests. Instead of voting for only one candidate for a race, instead, if there are multiple candidates you wish to vote for, you rank them. Candidate X is your first choice, Y is your second, and maybe you don't rank any of the other candidates because they didn't earn your vote. What this allows is 2 things. It removes the spoiler effect in voting and is a more democratic method for voters to choose their candidates. To provide a recent example and better explanation if you're still unsure how this process works, the office for mayor of New York is done by ranked choice voting. During their primary in June of last year, there were 11 Democratic candidates on the ballot. After the first round of voting, had this been majority-based, no candidate reached 50%, and a runoff would have been held between the top 2 candidates. Had it been plurality, Zoran would have won with his initial 43.8% of the vote. Since it's ranked choice, the candidates with the least votes are eliminated, and the voters of that candidate have their vote transferred to their next choice, if they made one. With the results from the New York mayor primary, there are a couple of important things to note. The first is the 1,581 people who wasted their time and the time of the election workers to count and reallocate their write-in votes. Of the 11 candidates, you really couldn't decide on one of them. I'll have more to say on write-in candidates later in this video, but when you look at the second round of voting, far less votes were transferred compared to the initial 1,581, meaning they didn't rank any other candidate. It's their right to do so, but also silly. In the third round of voting, every candidate but the top 2 was mathematically unable to change position, and thus all were eliminated with their votes transferred to either of the top 2 candidates if they were ranked on those ballots. What made Zoran's primary win possible, in addition to the hard work of his campaign and Zoran just being a talented politician, was his cross-endorsement with Brad Lander. They had asked their supporters to rank each other as their first and second choices, and to not rank Cuomo. While not every Brad Lander supporter voter went to Zoran, a large chunk still did, resulting in Zoran's victory with 56.4% of the vote after the third round. Sure, a direct count is simpler, but ranked choice voting allows voters to support candidates they want to vote for, and ranking an additional candidate if their preferred choice doesn't earn larger support. It also avoids the scenario of progressives splitting their vote when two or more run for the same seat. Anyway, that's ranked choice voting, and that's used in Maine for both the primary and general elections. As stated before, it's a semi-close primary. For new voters, you have 21 days before the June 9th primary to register. Even though we are past the May 19th deadline, it's still not too late for new registrations, as Maine also allows same-day voter registration. However, for any Republicans who would have wanted to change affiliation to vote in the Democratic primary, you have until 15 days before the election to do so, but that deadline will probably also be passed by the time this video is released. Regardless, those who are registered Democratic or independent voters, voting is important, and there may also be other local and state level elections in your area this year. Allow this video to be a component of your political research, not the totality of it. As for the congressional races, you do have inspiring candidates worth voting for in your 2nd District and the U.S. Senate race. For those who are new to the channel, here's a quick reminder of what I look for when deciding which congressional candidates to spotlight and approve. The policies I list here are what I want to see on their campaign web pages. I want to hear them speak about these issues on social media and with their constituents in their communities and at town halls or at any other event. Now, this isn't necessarily a complete policy list, just an outline of the priorities that also fits on one screen. Not every candidate is going to list out every policy or agree on everything, but the more the better. If a candidate doesn't have a policy page or any social media presence, that's the first and final red flag, and I move on to the next candidate to research. On the other hand, any candidate who has a decent policy page and has been endorsed by any one of the 10 trusted political groups listed will be an approved candidate in most cases. Occasionally, there might be 2 or more progressives in the same race, which then leads to further comparison of who's the better candidate. When candidates speak only about how they aren't Donald Trump or not a Republican, that's not a campaign message. Millions of Americans, myself included, are tired of this political non-answer. Saying vague platitudes and cliches, as so often said by spineless and corrupt Democrats, is also unacceptable. One example to pay attention to is the language candidates use around healthcare. Vague statements like, I support healthcare, but then provide no other supporting details. It's not acceptable. Do they support fixing the system by implementing Medicare for all? Or do they support the for-profit corporate healthcare structure that harms millions of people every day? If we are going to improve our lives, we the people need to elect better representatives who will fight to make that happen. Let's now discuss the candidates in Maine who are doing just that. In the 2nd District, this seat was held by Jared Golden, who is not running for re-election, and so the seat is open. In 2024, Jared won the seat in the first round of voting, but only barely. Less than 3,000 votes made the difference. If Democrats want to maintain this seat, their Democratic nominee better be more inspiring than Jared Golden ever was. Luckily in this district, there are several candidates who I believe will be able to do just that. Starting with the worst candidate running, don't rank Joe. Of these 4 candidates, he was the only one that didn't say support for Medicare for all or a single-payer health insurance program. He does say universal health care, so still not a terrible choice, but seeing as how more and more centrist and liberal corporatist Dems are adopting terms like universal health care to describe their public option plans, it's led me to not care for that term as much anymore. The other 3 do use the term Medicare for all, and were relatively similar on their progressive policies. Since Maine uses ranked choice voting, and since the majority of candidates are decent, I decided to approve all 3 of these candidates, and if I lived in Maine, here's how I would rank them. We'll start again with the least exciting of the 3. I rank Jordan Wood in 3rd because he does have a decent policy page, but no endorsements from any groups at this time. For the 2nd choice, Matt Dunlap. Again, good policy page, but also endorsed by Our Revolution. However, there was one candidate I think is even better. That candidate, who I believe would make the best representative in Maine's 2nd District, is Paige Loud, a Democratic socialist who is endorsed by citizens' impeachment. Paige is in alignment with many more of the policies I listed earlier, and her support for impeachment is why I would rank her above the other candidates. However, I don't have time to look into more details such as each candidate's ability on the ground. Do they have a campaign staff? Volunteers doing outreach? A good campaign website is a requirement for a winning campaign, but that alone does not make a winning campaign. Whoever the Dem nominee is among these 3 candidates, I believe they will win in the general election. For an example of an amazing candidate who does have both a great campaign website and putting in the work on the ground to earn the votes of the people of Maine, let's now talk about Graham Platner. When Graham launched his campaign last year in August, I, like many others, were inspired by the policy message put forth in his launch video. With a progressive policy page to match, he was one of the first secular lefty-approved candidates when I began this project. Then the tattoo gate happened, and I'll admit I was concerned when the stories first came out. For those who might have missed that story, which if you follow politics, you probably know about it, but the cliff notes are these. Platner's background includes serving in the Marines. During one of his tours, him and some fellow Marines got tattoos while drinking one evening. Graham picked the skull and crossbones tattoo design off the wall, and they were doing this while in Croatia. The tattoo happened to be a Totenkopf, a design used by the Nazis. There are many centrists and liberals in online social media bubbles still convinced that because of this story, Graham Platner is a Nazi. Those people are wrong. Graham did get the tattoo covered as soon as learning about this. There's no other evidence to suggest that Graham agrees with Nazi ideology. Those same people will then pivot to Graham's Reddit post from decades ago. Sure, some of the things he said were dumb, stupid, bigoted, combination of the three, but who he was 10, 15 years ago is not who he is now. Also, as they cite those Reddit posts, in other posts, he was actively condemning Nazi ideology at the same time, so undermines their first argument. Not to mention the real current-day Nazis are in this Republican administration. Stephen Miller and all the other Christian nationalists and white supremacists are MAGA Republicans. If he honestly held those views, that's where he would be. As for the bigoted statements he made, he's condemned those posts and has explained ad nauseum in interviews and at town halls with his community how he has been working to change for the better. While many in our Democratic Party across this country are stuck in their blue bubbles and can't accept new evidence, only willing to believe what the Democratic establishment has told them, that Graham holds extreme views and is unelectable. Well, I will trust the people of Maine over those in online bubbles who can't think critically. While those people yelled on social media, Platner's campaign had become so unstoppable, it forced the establishment-backed candidate, the current governor of Maine, Janet Mills, to drop out of the primary race. For those who are still confused, why? Confused how, despite these alleged controversies, that Graham Platner is still a candidate supported by the voters? It is because Graham Platner has been nonstop touring the state and speaking with the people of Maine. A campaign is far more than just having a good policy page and getting your name on the ballot. You have to be out speaking with voters, building a volunteer network, and offering the voters something to vote for. As mentioned, Platner's policy page aligns with many of the policies I listed earlier in the video. Additionally, at the time of this recording, his campaign has been endorsed by Leaders We Deserve, Our Revolution, Progressive Victory, Track APAC, and the Working Families Party. Once Janet Mills dropped out of the race, the Democrats officially endorsed Platner. I noticed some other people online were upset by this decision, since technically the primary is still ongoing. Now sure, are there technically two other candidates that voters could theoretically vote for? Sure, but they won't. They won't because Graham Platner is the better candidate who has and continues to go all around Maine speaking with the people, going on interviews and communicating his vision for a better Democratic Party. The other candidates will not get a substantial amount of votes in the primary. The David Costello fella, probably a kind enough guy, has an okay policy page, but he has no campaign presence. The only time I remember that he's running is when I look at this Ballotpedia page. But at least he put in the work to make the ballot. The write-in candidate, Andrea LaFlame, who again, a nice person with decent policy positions, but she won't win as a write-in candidate. She does have a larger social media presence when compared to David Costello, but just being a candidate on Blue Sky isn't going to work. At best, Andrea might get a little over 1,000 votes, but I doubt even that will happen. She is endorsed by Citizens Impeachment, who I normally agree with their endorsements, but I can't do it for a write-in candidate, and not when there is clearly a better candidate on the ballot. And it's a shame, too. Had Andrea or half of the candidates running in the 2nd district decided to run against the incumbent in the 1st, There could have been an approved candidate running for every seat this cycle. Maybe in 2028, we'll see some of these candidates running again for either the 1st District or to replace the other geriatric senator. Due to the great campaign Platner has been running, if you live in Maine, chances are you may have already participated in one of his town halls. If by chance you haven't seen any interview or town hall of his, maybe you are someone that only thinks of Platner as he has been described in those establishment hit pieces, I have 2 clips I decided to share with you as they highlight 2 important points about his campaign. I'll play them back to back. The first is from a town hall earlier in the year when he addresses the concerns of one of his constituents, and the second is from a recent interview he did with Mehdi on his channel Zeteo, quickly discussing his policy views.
I would love to be out protesting. I would love to be out knocking on doors, but I'll be honest, a person like me could get killed right now in this country. I believe in you, and I believe that you are a better man than you once were in the past, because I'm a better person than I was in the past. If I stand with you, will you fight with me? Will you stand up for me?
I firmly believe that every single American has the right to live the life they want to live in their own body as they see fit. I also fully recognize that as a cis white male with a bunch of tattoos and a long combat record, that I get to put myself out there in ways that other people don't. I just want to tell you, this is why I'm doing this. I am doing this because I know that I can say things. I know that I can have conversations. I know that I can knock on doors in places that a lot of other people can't have access to, that a lot of other people won't feel safe in. That is a responsibility that I feel, and it is why I am doing this. And I just want to say thank you, because I know how hard this is. Yeah, I just want to say that, yes, I will absolutely stand next to you. And if we ever have to go knock doors together, I'm happy to stand by your side.
So,
of real people.
On that note, let's do a quick rapid fire to see where you stand on some real issues. Would you vote in favor of a $20 minimum wage?
Yes.
Would you vote to get rid of the Senate filibuster?
Yes.
Would you vote to convict Donald Trump in an impeachment trial?
Yes.
Do you support statehood for DC and Puerto Rico?
Yes.
Do you support Chuck Schumer for Senate Majority Leader?
No.
Do you support Hakeem Jeffries for House Speaker in 2027?
No.
Would you support a ban on assault weapons?
No.
If you go on to win your Senate seat in Maine, will you run for president in 2028?
No.
All right, so those answers, I think a lot of people will be nodding along, apart from probably the assault weapons ban question, which I think, as you know, a lot of progressives will disagree with you on and say it's a major issue that helps prevent mass shootings. What would you say to them?
I think in a country that's already awash in guns, we have 20 to 30 million AR-15s in America. We don't actually know how many. Restricting access to people with a violent history or people who are going to commit a violent act, that is where we're going to see the most effect. And I support universal background checks, and I support red flag laws, like the one that Maine passed by ballot measure overwhelmingly last November. I think that those, combined with expanding mental health services across the board as part of a much more substantial healthcare system, and using the power of the federal government to elevate people out of poverty, I think holistically, when we think about gun violence, that's where we're going to get the most reduction.
The reasons for why these 2 clips. The first one provides an example of how Platner is running a campaign for all of his constituents. He is there out in his communities listening to their concerns, and after watching his response to that question, are you still with a straight face going to tell me this guy's a Nazi? If you say yes, after this video, turn off the phone and the computer and go outside. The second clip. It's always great hearing candidates be clear in their answers about certain policies and who they won't support for certain leadership positions. Sure, some liberals may not like the assault weapons ban answer, but as someone who grew up around firearms in Pennsylvania and has worked with many gun nuts at various workplaces, Graham is 100% right on the issue there. The U.S. has a gun culture with more guns than people in this country. I don't agree with that's how it should be. I'm just stating that's where we are right now. When guns are used in violent mass shootings, Yes, the access to the firearm plays a major role, and that is understood. But the root cause of the violent action isn't just the existence of the gun. It's poverty, mental illness, and so many of the other societal problems we face that haven't been addressed for decades. So I agree with Platner's position. Let's get Medicare for All passed, increase wages and unionization and education, and then reevaluate the gun issue then, while also supporting background checks and red flag laws. That is the moderate position a majority of Americans will agree to when voting. There are countless other great examples of Graham talking about policy and explaining his vision for a better future. These are the actions that make him one of the best candidates running this election cycle. For candidates to win, be like Graham Platner and be out in your communities. Communicate clearly what you are fighting for and why the voters should vote for you. The primary election and voting will still happen on June 9th, but as far as the U.S. Senate race is concerned, the best candidate is clear, and I believe a majority of Maine voters will agree. And there you have it, folks. Secular lefty approved candidates for Maine. Again, only one of those candidates will win the 2nd district, with Paige being the best option. In the Senate, Graham Platner is the best option. Just having representatives who are Democrats isn't good enough. We need public servants ready to improve our lives in whatever capacity they can. While I don't spend much time on other races in each state, I did notice Our Revolution endorsed Troy Jackson for the governor's race, and so I wanted to share that quickly as well before ending this video. But that will be all for this episode. What do you think? Is there any important information I missed? And who will you be voting for? Let me know in the comments. There are 3 other states voting on June 9th, which include Nevada, North Dakota, and South Carolina. These will be the next states reviewed in this series. Be sure you're subscribed and ring that bell to be notified of my newest videos. If you found anything I said in today's video useful, please give it a like and share it everywhere. Together, we can make Americans more educated, and hopefully that will result in better election outcomes. Until the next video, please consider checking out my other work on this channel. Any additional watch time and shares will help the channel reach more people and is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for listening. Take care.